Now it's my pleasure to introduce Jose Cerecedo Lopez and David Townsend. David, along with co-authors Lowell Busenitz and Rob Pittick, just recently had a piece published in Journal of Business Venturing in this space. I'll share the link with you in just a minute. But David and Jose are going to present sort of an overview of what's going on in research in this field, sort of across the board. So with that, I will turn it over to Jose and allow him to take us to the next step. Jose, welcome.
Thank you, Brett. Hi, everybody. Let me really quickly share my screen over here. And I'm hoping everybody's seeing the slides, right? Yeah? Okay. So again, thank you, Brett. I think Brett made reference to the PhD student seminar. So I was there last year. And a quick story right before I start. I also remember when I started my PhD program, which I'm about to finish, attended it to this conference. I think it was the first version of L.I.F.E. And I think I was, oh, it's really cool that this is happening and people is researching stuff at the intersection of faith and entrepreneurship. So I'm pretty honored. I'm pretty happy to have the opportunity to be here and talk a little bit more about the state of the field. And this is thank you to a lot of the work that I've been able to work in with David and Brett. And I'm very excited to just share a little bit of what we've found in this piece that we're kind of like through the process of reviewing and all this stuff. So really quick, right, just to give you a quick overview of the current state of faith and entrepreneurship, right? So all of the facts, figures, the data that I'm going to share comes from a review that we've been working in entrepreneurship and management journals with a focus on ABS ranking entrepreneurship journals 3 and higher there, or FT 50 journals, right? And we've been looking all the way back to kind of like the beginning of the field until the end of last year, of 2023. So kind of like really quick, right? What we see is a huge growth, right? And I'll share a little bit more of that on the number of publications. And also kind of like I think also pretty cool is the quality, right? The outlets that are publishing this research is also kind of like growing. And we see a lot of FT 50 journals publishing this research. So kind of like as a conclusion, right, we talk about how there's a clear emergence of this field already. Kind of like Brad talked about this growing movement, right, and at this intersection and researching faith and entrepreneurship. So I think that's kind of like the overview really quick, and then I'm going to share a little bit more of the data, right? So some of the things we get to this conclusion on our review is, again, the increasing number of publications in top-tier journals, right? I'll share a little bit more of the most popular FT journals where we see this type of publications and where we see it growing. Also, kind of like an improvement in the theoretical and empirical approaches. I'll talk a little bit more of the methodological things that we found, and then David will tell us a little bit more about the theoretical approaches and the future research. And then this is a pretty awesome thing, right? How this theological perspective, right, and looking at entrepreneurship through this lens of faith and religion, it's providing these unique insights, right, into entrepreneurship, right? It's really contributing to theory. It's allowing us to understand better a lot of the stuff that we didn't have access to. So I think that's another amazing thing that we have there. So this is, I think, the most cool graph, right? So we break it down here and kind of like way before 1998 and then kind of like 5-year periods. And we just see this huge exponential growth these last 5 years, right? From 2019 to 2023, 472% growth rate. So from our review, right, we ended up with reviewing 83 articles. Our search gave us a little bit more, but the ones that we found critical and very valuable to our review were 83 articles, and from those, right, 56 of those were just published in the last 5 years, right? So again, right, we can see this kind of like what they call hockey stick figure on how much publications around the field have grown in the field, right? Another cool fact, right, fun fact, is how just in the last year, 2023, we have the same amount of articles that were published in the 5-year period before 2019, 2023, right? So from these 5-year periods from 2014 and 2018, 16 articles were published, and we just had that from our search and our review in the last year. So I think that's a pretty amazing thing that is showing us how everything is growing. These are the FT 50 journals that we found articles, right? Pretty cool that also, right, from our search, almost 50%, our review, sorry, the articles we review, 50% almost came from FT 50 journals, right? And also kind of like a third of what has been published in the last 5 years comes from FT 50 journals, right? So that kind of like going again to the first idea of the increasing in rigor and quality of the publications and the subfield. Then we have a little bit of, well, which journals are publishing the most, right? So Journal of Business Ethics is kind of like the main driver of publications, right? So we see a lot of this research going to the realms of moral values, ethics, all this stuff. But then we see a huge diversity in entrepreneurship journals, right? ETP, JBB, Small Business Economics, lots of entrepreneurship journals there. Also kind of like from all over. We've seen, as Brett also commented, right, a lot of these special issues coming. So that's also pretty cool. But here, Journal Business Ethics kind of like being the main driver. Right, and to finalize a little bit of my part and give room to David to share a little bit more about the theoretical perspectives and the future research. Some of the stuff that we saw, right, and a lot of what we do in the work that we've been doing is comparing the most recent research and publications to the review piece that Block did and co-authors did in 2020, right? So we're seeing a lot of more shift from conceptual to empirical research, right? So we're seeing a lot of these more empirical research. We're also seeing how, in comparison to what Block reviews piece and their co-authors talk about, we're seeing more qualitative work, a little bit more qualitative work, more theory testing, right? And this kind of like idea of theory building and developing, sorry, not just that kind of like sets a precedent for then going to theory testing, right? And something really cool that we also found was we're starting to see these experimental approaches, right? So we're starting to see some papers that are starting to do experiments, which also I think that allows for these theories and everything that we're developing to kind of like have a better assessment of causality. Some other stuff that I don't have here, right? We have an increased sample size, but also very diverse, right? From all the studies that we review, they come from all over the world, developing countries, developed countries, all types of faith and religious backgrounds, right? So we have multi-faith studies. We have some that focus more on Islam or Christianity, Catholicism, but very diverse, right? So I think that also kind of like gives a nice view of how diverse the field is in terms that we're looking at everything, right? And it's not just specific regions or specific faiths or religions, but very, very diverse. And I think that's also kind of like pretty cool on that sense. And that's all from my side. I want to let David have some time to also share with you a little bit of the theoretical approaches that we saw on our paper, and then talk a little bit about future research. So David, it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you, Jose. And I'll say that he's done a superb job really managing and leading our efforts on this review paper. So I appreciate that. And also say we had an allotted time schedule for this 15-minute block. I think he nailed it to the second. So that's quite impressive. So appreciate that. So quickly from a review perspective, right, we really identified 4 major buckets. And I think, some of these, for those of you working in the space, are potentially, areas that you've worked in or areas that you've been interested in working in. And they're kind of core to the field of entrepreneurship. And so not perhaps surprising, but still quite important in terms of the insights that they're generating. Certainly Brett's work and others looking at the role of identities, social identities, role identities, the JBV, relational identity in God, I think was a fantastic new entrant into that space, using more of a relational approach. And thinking about sort of this divine human connection and how that influences entrepreneurial behaviors and actions. Of course, a lot of work in institutional theory, and I'll come back to Nathan's presentation, which was just fantastic. But certainly this idea that institutions influencing entrepreneurship. But I think there's also a very interesting kind of emergent field there, and he mentioned kind of intersections of institutions and gender. and other related concepts. And I think we're seeing, and I'll talk a little bit more on the future dimension of that in a second, but there's a lot of work on that as well in terms of just understanding how different types of entrepreneurs, whether it's, you know, the type of functions they're involved in, or if it's gender or geographic place, these institutional forces both constraining and enabling, but also being transformed by the nature of sort of the entrepreneurial action. Certainly social capital network theories are important. Again, kind of relational perspectives are there in terms of how religion influences, shape social ties among organizations. I think this idea of social spiritual capital is an important part of some of that research stream. Again, I'll return to some of this in future research perspectives. And then one that's near and dear to my heart, there's a lot of interesting work, I think, emerging around decision-making theories in terms of how religious influences, beliefs are influencing how entrepreneurs make decisions, take action. Our recent JBV kind of provides an intersection between different religious beliefs, practices, and you know, decision-making, dealing with uncertainty. All right, so we can go to the future research. And so from a future research perspective, and again, I thought Nathan's talk was just absolutely fantastic and really laid out a very rich array of different concepts, different ways for us to approach, I think, what is a very complex but important subject in the field. And one of the things that, you know, I think Brett has done just a remarkable job in helping build, you know, called an active academic entrepreneurship to really build and help organize this movement that we're all, you know, contributing to, is really taking religion seriously, not just as an input or a contextual factor that's kind of outside of the entrepreneur, but, you know, to use one of Nathan's comments or phrases, this idea of lived experience, right? Then religion, religious beliefs, practices are infused in a huge number of humans around the world, right? And all the diverse ways that humans live and act. And so within the field of entrepreneurship, I think there's you know, a big influence on subjectivism and the role of beliefs, and certainly why entrepreneurs do the things that they do. You know, my great mentor, one of the first questions, you know, he sort of posed to me is this, well, why do entrepreneurs think the way that they do, or how do entrepreneurs think, you know, and this is just such fundamental parts of the field. But I think there's some important areas around this idea of self-transcendence and in the way that entrepreneurs are able to sort of lift themselves conceptually out of their current circumstances. We think a lot about sort of future orientation, right, or expectations. And so these kind of future imaginaries, we're not just seeing the world as it is today, but entrepreneurs are sort of seeing the future and what's possible. And so this idea of self-transcendence is something where I think entrepreneurship scholars can grab onto some of the work in religious studies, but also contribute back to that, right, of how people are able to kind of pull or, you know, sort of draw themselves out of their current circumstances to, quote unquote, see the future. We're very interested in hybridity and syncretism, I think, in our field. And I think there's a lot of room to understand kind of how entrepreneurs engage in blending and mixing of different institutional or cultural logics, which also ties into specific perspectives around institutional work and cultural production, and how entrepreneurs build products and services and ways to, you know, again, to sort of capture some of these elements. But I think that, to me, draws back to one of the most important things. And one of my doctoral students, kind of my closing point here, asked me, okay, so you're doing all this work in artificial intelligence. Why are you also studying religion? Aren't these two things completely distinct and not overlapping? And to me, it always goes back to one of my favorite quotes from Carl Weick, and, you know, in the Mann Gulch paper about cultivating the attitude of wisdom. And to me, you know, as things become more digital and artificial intelligence continues to rapidly advance, the idea that as humans, we still need to act in a wise fashion, no matter how sophisticated our tools are, I think, for me, is a personally motivating research question, but one I think that's important. How does religion inform wise action among entrepreneurs? So appreciate the opportunity to share. Again, just kudos to Jose for doing a tremendous job leading our efforts, and we'll look forward to more conversations today.